Every spring, millions of gardeners do the same thing. Buy seeds, start over, plant everything from scratch, nurse seedlings through the vulnerable weeks, hope the weather cooperates. And then, at the end of the season, watch it all die back and prepare to do it again. But certain vegetables completely ignore that system. They don't die back in a way that matters. They don't need replanting. They don't wait for a gardener to decide it's time to begin again. They just keep going. What if the easiest harvests don't come from the plants demanding the most attention, but from the ones you only ever have to plant once? Modern gardening tends to celebrate effort. Bigger yields, better varieties, more intensive methods. The assumption underneath most gardening advice is that productivity comes from work, and more work produces more food. But many of the vegetables people grew for centuries were valued for the opposite reason. They required less, not more. They were chosen specifically because they returned without being asked, because they spread without being planted, because they fed families through difficult seasons, precisely because they didn't depend on everything going right. The most productive food plant in a garden may not be the one demanding constant attention. It might be the one quietly expanding in a corner that nobody touches. Egyptian walking onion. Most vegetables disappear if you stop planting them. This one starts expanding. It produces small bulblets at the top of its stalks. And as those stalks grow taller and heavier, they bend toward the ground under their own weight, depositing the bulblets a foot or two away from the parent plant. Those bulblets root, grow, produce their own stalks, bend, deposit again. Left alone, a single plant walks slowly across a bed, expanding outward, season after season, without any intervention. The green tops are harvestable almost year-round in mild climates. The bulbs develop over time, and the plant never needs replanting, never needs starting from seed again, and becomes more productive with each passing year. It is, in the most literal sense, a vegetable that works without being asked. Sorrel. Sorrel has a quality that almost nothing else in a kitchen garden can offer. Most gardeners wait until late spring for their first harvest. Sorrel often starts producing while the garden still looks asleep. While the rest of the garden is still cold soil and bare beds, sorrel is already producing fresh, sharp, lemony leaves that go straight into soups, sauces, and salads. It emerges early because it never really left. The roots overwinter. The plant simply resumes. Cut it back, and it returns. Harvest it hard, and it recovers. It doesn't ask for rich soil or careful feeding. It just grows, persistently, in the space it was given. For a garden that often has nothing fresh to offer in early spring, sorrel fills that gap quietly and reliably, year after year, without being replanted. Something already connects the plants in this video, and it's worth naming before going further. These aren't behaving like crops. They're behaving like ecosystems. They establish. They expand. They persist. They develop root systems and structures that annual plants never have the time to build. They become more productive over time rather than less. Most modern food gardening treats each season as a fresh start, a blank page, another beginning. These plants treat each season as a continuation of something already underway. That distinction changes how the rest of this list makes sense. Good King Henry. Entire generations depended on this plant. Today, most gardeners have never even heard its name. That alone makes it worth paying attention to. It's a perennial food plant, producing edible shoots in early spring and leaves through the season. It establishes quietly in its first year, then expands reliably for years afterward. Tolerates poor soil, returns earlier than most crops, asks for very little in return. It disappeared from common knowledge, not because it stopped being useful, but simply because it got left behind, and nobody thought to bring it back. Jerusalem artichoke.
The challenge with Jerusalem artichokes isn't growing them.
It's stopping them. Plant a few tubers once, and the bed returns the following year, fuller, denser, and more productive than before. Leave a single small tuber in the ground after harvest, and the plant will be back in spring, as though nothing happened. They spread through underground runners, filling available space steadily and with very little encouragement. The harvests are generous. The flavor, sweet, nutty, entirely unlike most root vegetables, is something most people encounter and immediately wish they'd grown sooner. The practical reality is that Jerusalem artichokes need a defined space, a bed with clear boundaries, or a spot where spreading doesn't cause problems. Given that, they become one of the most reliable and low-effort harvests in any kitchen garden. Just don't plant them somewhere you'll later want back. Lovage. One lovage plant is, in most kitchens, completely sufficient. It grows large, taller than most people expect, with strong hollow stems and deep green leaves that carry an intense celery-like flavor. A single leaf changes a soup. A few stems added to a stock pot do more than an entire bunch of most other herbs. And that single plant returns every year, dies back in winter, reappears in spring, grows through the season. The cycle continues for years, sometimes decades, without the plant ever needing to be replaced. There are gardens where the lovage outlasts the gardener who planted it, where people harvest from a plant they didn't put in the ground themselves, left by someone who understood that some food plants are worth establishing for the long term. One plant, years of flavor, no replanting required. Rhubarb. Rhubarb is one of the few food plants that genuinely improves with age. Young plants produce modestly. Established plants, 3, 4, 5 years in, produce abundantly. Very old plants, left largely undisturbed for decades, can become extraordinary. Some people harvest rhubarb from crowns their grandparents established. That kind of time scale doesn't fit modern gardening thinking, which tends to focus on this season, this harvest, this year. But rhubarb rewards the opposite approach: patience, minimal disturbance, and the understanding that the best harvests from some plants are still years away. Plant it once. Leave it largely alone. Come back to it for the rest of your gardening life. Asparagus. Asparagus takes time to establish. The first year, nothing is harvested. The second year, very little. By the third year, the bed begins producing, and from that point, it produces for decades. There are asparagus beds that have been in continuous harvest for 40 years. Beds planted by people who are no longer alive, still feeding the families who inherited the garden. The original gardener is gone. The harvest remains. That's not a metaphor. It's a practical reality of what asparagus becomes when it's given the space and patience it needs. The work is front-loaded and then largely finished. What follows is a harvest that returns every spring, reliably, for longer than most people plan their gardens. Nature rarely starts from zero. Forests don't replant themselves each spring. Meadows don't wait for someone to scatter seed every year. The most productive ecosystems are the ones that build on what was already there, deepening, expanding, and becoming more resilient over time. The most overlooked corner of most gardens isn't the one that needs more work. It's the one where something like this could be quietly establishing itself right now, building toward harvests that return on their own, season after season, long after the planting is finished. Modern gardening teaches us to restart every season. Nature teaches something different. The strongest systems are the ones that keep building on what already exists. Some of the smartest food plants don't start over every year. They never really stopped.